Hello everybody, I am Jmulls and welcome to my wish list of what I want out of Final Fantasy XIV 8.0. When we get to the FanFest, they're going to go over details concerning the new expansion. So I think it's a good a time as any to sit back, relax, and to discuss what we hope we see out of that expansion. If I was to include everything, this video could easily go on for very long. So I'm going to keep it down to the most important elements for me personally. So let's get into it. Now let's start with the most cope take I have on this list. Bar none, and I don't even think it's close. What I would like to see is a bit of a combat overhaul. I don't think the play is to completely change the game's core fundamental gameplay or anything like that. You need to retain that identity. But what I personally hope to see are changes made to overall job design, maybe a little bit of customization thrown into the mix, and some ideally changes to core fundamental mechanics as to how the combat operates. I would like the buttons to feel far more snappy when I press them. Oftentimes when you press a button, it can take a little bit to actually see the animation and the result of that button input. To me, that creates a sense of the buttons not particularly feeling mechanically satisfying to hit, and this is job agnostic for me. It's a little bit less for like casters because there's a cast bar there, but whenever anything is instant cast, I still feel this issue. And it's something that affects every piece of content in this game for me. It may not bother you, but this is my list. Especially as someone who mains tank in FF14 nowadays, especially when I'm weaving a bunch of OG CDs into my rotation, everything can just kind of get lost in the sauce of it all, and it all blends into one like muddled mess for me. And it can make the gameplay loop not feel particularly mechanically satisfying. A lot of people, when it comes to job design in FF14 nowadays, and the current state it's in, will argue about its overall complexity, or the oversimplification or homogenization. I do think those are elements to it, but for me at the end of the day, I don't mind playing a hard job or an easier job. The most important thing for me is, am I enjoying pressing my buttons on a moment-to-moment basis? I don't really get that out of Final Fantasy XIV nowadays. I used to, but a lot of the little flares that I've enjoyed in job design have been kind of whittled out. My favorite one to point back to is back in Stormblood on Dark Knight, you can kind of just spam Abyssal Drain on packs of enemies in dungeons, especially with Dark Arts, right? Was it the most like interesting or in-depth gameplay loop of all time? No, but it felt really dang cool to see all those numbers pop, and then to hear the Abyssal Drain heal sound effect over and over and over again. It's little things like that that can really make or break a job / class in an MMO for me. Also, when it concerns like core job design, there's not really many that I've played in the last couple of expansions that has a moment that feels truly satisfying to me. I think the closest that exists right now is self-healing on Warrior or Dark Knight in dungeons, or the melee combo on Red Mage. I think those are like the closest to things that make me go, yeah, this is really dang cool. I like having moments in my job's rotation or my class's rotation, if we're talking about other games, where I feel like I'm playing something a little bit different. The pace maybe changes, or something really cool is happening on my screen or in the buttons that I'm pressing. I don't really get that out of a lot of jobs right now in FF14, and I know that sounds rather vague, but it's also an issue that kind of plagues most of the jobs that I play in this game. It's not like I don't enjoy any of them. I enjoy Red Mage a bit, and I still prefer tanking in this game than most of the time doing DPS. But I haven't been excited about pressing my buttons in FF14 for a little bit now, and I think that kind of sullies a lot of the actual content they try to implement into the game, because if I'm not enjoying the buttons that I'm pressing, then it really sours the content that I'm trying to experience, because, well, I'm experiencing it through a muddied lens. It's not crystal clear, if that makes sense. I think there's a couple of ways you can go about like addressing that, but I think the core fundamental issue for me that will always be there is that Final Fantasy XIV takes a certain amount of time as you register an input, and the animations can be rather lengthy for just a single button input. I don't really ever see them like addressing that or shortening that to make the buttons feel a bit more snappy or mechanically intense for me. So I think the best way they can go about, well, remedying this issue, at least for me, is by adding a little bit of customization to the job design. Nothing too in-depth, right? Like, we don't need Path of Exile talent trees or anything like that. But I wouldn't mind it if they implemented something akin to phantom jobs from the Occult Crescent into the game baseline, even if there ends up being a BIS, even if there ends up being a meta spec or whatever, I do think it's important to be able to at least have the illusion of choice, or giving us different choices that might be beneficial in certain situations. I think having some level of, oh, I chose to use this instead of this can go a long way, especially in an RPG, especially in a Final Fantasy RPG. It's not like Final Fantasy RPGs never had customization or anything like that. They're actually rather known for it. And Final Fantasy XIV even used to have a little bit of customization, but personally, I think something like the Phantom Job system just incorporated baseline into the experience or something akin to that could go a long way. That and ideally redesigning quite a few of the jobs and personally adding more things to the kits, all the while focusing on making each button input feel good by itself. I think that can go a long way. Bit vague, I understand that, but still. It's the biggest issue I find myself confronting every time Final Fantasy XIV adds something new to it. I just get kind of bored of the buttons that I'm pressing rather quickly, and it diminishes my excitement to engage in new content. Okay, let's talk about one that's really important to me as well. Not as important as the job customization and job overhauls that I personally want to see out of the game, but one that's important nonetheless, that I do think they're trying to address a little bit, and that is the actual gameplay we do in the MSQ. I would personally want to see them add more gameplay scenarios into the MSQ, and I love it when they do those one-on-one combat encounters during the MSQ, like when we fought Galulja, whatever, when we fought Xenos at the end of Endwalker, stuff like that. Predominantly while we are playing as the Warrior of Light instead of some other jabroni, because when we have to play as some other character, the kits we get are really basic and, for me, boring, and the fights drag on for way too long, so I kind of lose interest after a bit. If you let me retain my kit, though, as the Warrior of Light, and you give me those one-on-one combat encounters during the MSQ, I love those things. Besides the one we had in 7.1, I thought that one was dog crap, but that is a bit of a rare exception. I want to see more gameplay variety in the MSQ overall, on top of those one-on-one fights. I liked the puzzles they attempted to do in 7.3. They were a bit inelegant in terms of how you interfaced with them a lot of the times, like the pipe one, but I can appreciate that section, even if it did drag a little bit, for just attempting to spice up the gameplay loop, and I do hope they go more in that direction going into the future. At the end of the day, Final Fantasy XIV is a video game. I don't think it should shy away from having gameplay in its, well, video game, especially during the MSQ. I don't mind having lengthy cutscenes or anything like that. Like, hell, I play Xenosaga and Xenoblade. I mean, come on. But I think adding more gameplay into the MSQ can go a long way, especially gameplay that isn't absolutely bare bones and simplistic, to where you question why they ever added this to begin with, because it's not really doing anything. I liked sections like the This Is Thencred section from Endwalker. I liked having sections like the Escape from Golmald bit, also in Endwalker, fighting Galuljaja, solving the puzzles in 7.3. Stuff doesn't have to be overly complicated or anything like that, just something to break up the pace of the MSQ and give a little bit of spice. After all, it is a video game, and in my opinion, you need to have some kind of variety. I think it can go a long way. It's something that I hope they continue to experiment with in 7.4 and 7.5, but I really want to see them make a big push in this direction when it comes to 8.0. Especially with them going in the direction of the quantum difficulty and modular difficulty. I would really like to see them do a bunch of combat scenarios and just give us different difficulty options. I don't even need more rewards or anything like that. I'll just do it for the thrill of it, because not everyone's going to be like me and wants to have some kind of engaging gameplay during the MSQ. Some people just like it to be a cutscene simulator. I'm not saying they're wrong or anything, I'm just saying you can have an easy mode or an easier mode or anything like that, sure. Just have a separate toggleable difficulty for those that want a little bit more meat in the gameplay variety department when it comes to the MSQ. Look, I'll be the first to admit none of these are really, like, out of left field or anything, but especially this one, the content cadence in FF14 needs to change. It's actually abysmal. I don't know why we are waiting for, like, the 0.5 series just to get Beastmaster, which was advertised at the beginning of the expansion. I know they did pretty much the same thing with Blue Mage back in the day, but, like, that doesn't excuse it in my opinion. I do think it's important to have something come out in the patches to maintain excitement and to keep players interested during the actual patches, right? You can't just, like, release all the content that normally comes out across all the patches just on the .0 patch and call it a day, right? But what I am saying is that some key things need to come online way earlier in an expansion's life cycle. I think things like any new limited jobs that are added, and like the first tier or zone, wave, whatever, of like cosmic exploration as well. But then like one of the following needs to be online way earlier. Either variant dungeons, deep dungeons, or like field operations such as the Occult Crescent, Abazia, or Eureka. Something like that, in my opinion, needs to come online way early in an expansion's life cycle, because that early bit is so supremely dull when there's like nothing new. I am a big believer that one of the most important elements for an MMO, especially a new expansion's launch, is hype. And when an expansion doesn't launch with anything mechanically particularly all that interesting to do when you get to endgame, I think that does deflate the experience a bit. And I think we saw that very much so when it came to Dawntrail. There's honestly not that much to say about this particular topic in my opinion, because I feel that a lot of people just understand what I'm talking about when I say a lot of the really cool and interesting features that people are looking forward to when it comes to a new FF14 expansion don't get released for like 8, 10, 12, 14, sometimes 16 months into the lifespan of the expansion. That is very late into the game. And like, look, I like the idea of modular difficulty and quantum difficulty when it comes to what they're attempting to do in the remaining patches of Dawntrail. I think it's a noble idea and a good idea to try and make the content appeal to a wider audience, so long as the quality isn't compromised. You don't want to go so far in that direction where it no longer really appeals to anyone in its attempt to appeal to everyone. From what we've heard and seen from the Deep Dungeon, I don't think they're going in that direction, though I don't have too much experience with Deep Dungeon in this game. I like a lot of the things I'm hearing about the new Deep Dungeon at least. And if that kind of design can find itself in other pieces of content, they pretty much came out and said that they're going to do something similar for the variant dungeon in point 4. I do think that can go a long way. It's just, I think the game could use changes to its overall game design that goes further than just adding or slapping modular difficulty onto each of the systems and calling it a GG. I think it's a really cool idea and a possibly great change if it's made in conjunction with some other things, right? Like what we've talked about today, like job changes, mixing up the gameplay of things like the MSQ, possibly even using modular difficulty and the design for that kind of stuff as well. That could be really cool. And getting key pieces of content online way early in an expansion's life cycle, so people aren't just sitting around for months waiting for something really new to do. I think the biggest thing Final Fantasy XIV needs, in the most general of statements, right, is just something exciting. It needs to break away from tradition. It needs to break away from that norm that it has found itself in for numerous expansions now. It needs to break the pace up. It needs to be a bit more risky in its approach to future content. And you'll also notice I haven't actually talked about the story itself. I've talked about the gameplay during the MSQ, but I haven't actually talked about the story itself, and that's largely because I really liked 7.2 and point 3. And if they're able to maintain that quality, or even get better from here on out, I'm good in that department. If we can get a 0.0 that is as solid and as well told as 0.2 and 0.3, that had to work off of 0.0 and 0.1, like I said, I'm good in that department. For me, it's a gameplay thing that I want to see the most changed and remedied going into the future. I want to see stuff done with jobs, gameplay during the MSQ, and also the overall release schedule of content for Final Fantasy XIV. For me, those are the most important issues and the things I find myself wishing were just a bit different whenever I play FF14. But here's where you come in. I want to do something kind of interesting here. I want you to put down in the comments your own wish list for what you want to see out of 8.0 for Final Fantasy XIV. Try to be specific here and try to focus in on like the biggest thing that you want to see change or the two biggest things. And I may react to them in a future video. So bring your best, show your best, and let's talk Final Fantasy. And if you want to stick around to see that video and future Final Fantasy XIV and MMO coverage, you should leave a like and subscribe. Follow me on TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter, Jmulls G. I have a Discord in the description down below. And speaking of, are casuals to blame? Who's the best character in Dawntrail? These are just a couple of the hot take topics that we covered. And if you want to check out my thoughts and my impressions of your own hot takes, you should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet. again.